Sometime early next year, we will finally be getting our hands on Starfield, the next brand new single-player Bethesda RPG, which at this point feels like a once-in-a-decade event. It nearly is, in fact. Fallout 4 launched in 2015, so by the time Starfield comes out, it'll have been almost 8 years since their last major release. They've had some side projects since then, but those didn't go over too well, and they re-released Skyrim a few more times, but forget about that, because as they say, Starfield is the next real Bethesda game. It's also their first new IP in over 25 years, a chance to try something wholly new, and with that, they've said that their goal is to take what we've enjoyed about the Elder Scrolls and Fallout and bring it to a much larger scale, bring it out into space. And with that pitch, there is a lot to be excited for. Like a lot of you, I'm sure, I've loved my time with Bethesda RPGs, largely because they are such unique games. They build these rich, deep, interactive worlds that are so immersive, loaded with backstory and lore and characters, hidden secrets, and things to discover at just about every turn, coupled with an engine that, for all its flaws, is highly modifiable, adding a lot of longevity. And there's the fact that literally no one makes games like Bethesda. There are no direct competitors. Plenty of open world RPGs exist, don't get me wrong, but they're also not quite the same. Bethesda RPGs, while not without flaws, are really unique. However, as much as I am looking forward to sitting down and playing Starfield for the first time at some point next year, I do have a few big concerns. Some of it is issues Bethesda has always had with their games, like poor performance and lower end visual quality. Things that I hoped would have been improved upon with a new next-gen title, ideally, right? But also, there are added concerns surrounding, for example, their new approach of replacing entirely handcrafted worlds with scale. Massive and quite possibly quite uninteresting scale. There's 1,000 planets. There's probably not much to do on most of them, but hey, there's 1,000 of them. And then on top of that, there's also Bethesda's recent direction over these past 8 years with serial re-releases, phone games, a live service game, and a modern day approach to monetization. These are all concerns based on what we know about Starfield so far. There is still plenty of unknown, and while I may be drawing some conclusions, bear in mind nothing is definitive. This isn't a review after all. I haven't played the game, obviously, but there are elements of what we have seen and what we do know that are concerning, and that's what I'll be diving into here. The goal with a video like this is to just discuss these things, talk about what's concerning, in hopes that some of it gets addressed prior to launch, because hey, I would like this game to be great. I am a big fan of Bethesda titles, and I want to play and love more of what they do in the future. They've had a rough patch recently, and I guess we're hoping Starfield can surpass that. So let's dive in. First up, I want to address the visuals. You know, Bethesda isn't known for breaking ground in terms of how their games look, but I thought for sure, being their next major single-player title and a brand new IP, that they would step it up and aim to at least be on par visually with other modern-day RPGs. From what we saw, some of it is close, but most of it isn't. We got our first look at actual gameplay earlier this summer, and it was rough, not gonna lie. In particular, I think a lot of the outdoor environments just look bland and muddy. And you know, part of that was simply, this is space. They're making a game that has a lot of barren planets, and barren planets aren't exactly thrilling to look at, but it's more than that. There were things like the fact that the exterior shadows looked all very low res and grainy. A lot of the effects looked pretty awful, honestly. Like when that player ship first lands, when they get to the planet, the kick up of dust. This is 2022. Why does this look so bad? But in general though, if I had to put it to words, I would say that I just felt like everything looked washed out and flat. It didn't look like a brand new single player RPG in 2022. Sorry, 2023. When this thing is coming out. And the bottom line is, many of the shots that we saw in that trailer were anything but impressive. If nothing, they looked bad even. But not all of it. Not all of it. I do think that a lot of the indoor environments looked really good. Character models are also a huge step up for Bethesda, and I straight up loved some of the major points of interest that they showed, like the cities and installations, enemy bases, these mining facilities, all of this stuff. A lot of the large-scale landmarks they showcased were super hype for me, but not so much because I think they looked amazing visually, because yeah, everything does look a little flat, a little washed out, a little uninspiring, but more so like the scale scale of these areas, their design, mystery, and then knowing we will get to fully explore them, that was the part that was exciting. And I guess what it boils down to is I'm just surprised that the game looks so unimpressive visually. But again, hey, you know what? Bethesda isn't known for pushing the boundaries here, and they make up for it with the worlds that they craft, right? I was just hoping for more, I suppose. You know what Bethesda is known for, though? Poor performance, and they are knocking this one out of the park because yeah, beyond my impressions of the visuals, it was super obvious from the trailer that the game has big performance issues with regular hitching and frame drops all throughout. I'm someone actually who's susceptible to motion sickness when playing certain games. This is especially spurred on by a poor frame rate, so it is no exaggeration when I say watching this trailer literally made me feel sick. But hey, don't take my word for it. Let's go to the experts. Digital Foundry, they run performance analysis for this sort of thing all of the time, and they did so for the Starfield trailer, so let's see the results. They said that while the trailer itself was in 4K, they noticed many variations in shot clarity. For example, during any bits where there was actual gameplay, there was no anti-aliasing whatsoever. This resulted in these visibly jagged edges. This was noteworthy because the cinematic shots did have TAA and looked a bit better as a result. Also, there was a lack of reflections, period, and either screen space reflections or RT reflections were present. Now you might ask, why wouldn't they have anti-aliasing or reflections for the gameplay bits? Surely those are going to be options in the game. Well, the simple answer would be to improve performance. However, it doesn't seem to have mattered because they noted as well that the gameplay footage exhibited significant performance hiccups and was regularly dipping below 30 FPS. Now you might be thinking to yourself, hey Force, this was a pre-launch preview trailer. They'll fix performance by launch. Will they though? They haven't for any of their other titles. Bethesda is notorious for launching games that are full of bugs and with poor performance. This isn't like a fringe opinion either. It is undeniable even to the most ardent Bethesda fans, which I count myself as one of them. I love Bethesda games, and at the end of the day, I am hoping Starfield turns out well. It's just a shame that after all of this time, they still haven't figured out a way to build these worlds and have the games run well at the same time. It actually reminds me of the discussion that comes up whenever there's a new console generation coming out. People are saying, hey, surely with this generation, consoles will finally reach frame rates that we see on PC. But no, it never happens because companies continue to sacrifice the performance in the name of pushing the visuals, pushing the scale, pushing the density of stuff. And that just seems to be the case here as well. Bethesda is opting for this massive game, bumping up the visuals from their prior titles, and still having it run like garbage. I think it's important to keep in mind here as well, this wasn't some like rogue employee capturing gameplay footage and then leaking it onto the internet. This was a highly curated trailer meant to showcase the best of the game. If the best they could muster for their huge gameplay reveal couldn't stay above 30 FPS, that does not bode well for the rest of the game. I mean, think about it. They put this trailer together. They could have shown us gameplay footage from any one of the thousands of planets and any combat sections, any vertical slice of the game, anything from anywhere. They had full carte blanche to show us whatever. This was the first gameplay trailer for Starfield. They obviously wanted to put their best foot forward and show the game off in the best possible light. And even under those circumstances, they could not go more than a few seconds without showing huge frame rate drops. That is crazy. It is just crazy. And it leads me to believe that most of the game probably runs this poorly, if that's the best they could show us. Now that said, I fully acknowledge the reality of game development being messy. New builds and updates are constantly rolling out. They're constantly working on and improving this stuff as they inch closer and closer to release. And no doubt when this trailer was released on June 12th, they were probably already like several builds beyond where they were when they recorded it and put the trailer together, I'm sure. But again, knowing that this was their big gameplay reveal for their first new IP in 25 years from the company who made Skyrim, one of the top 20 selling video games of all time, and they couldn't keep it over 30 FPS for 10 seconds at a time. I suppose on the flip side, I'm at least happy that they're being honest with where the game was at that point. They didn't try to like hide the frame drops by strategically cutting to different scenes whenever the frame drops were about to happen. Yeah, well, before we move on, I do want to touch on some of the positives here though, because there are a few. Like I said up at the top, top, I thought the indoor environments, the character models, and the points of interest all looked pretty cool, and a lot of these improvements are coming from their new engine. So Starfield is built on Creation Engine 2. It's an updated version of the same engine that Bethesda has been using on their games ever since Skyrim. There were some clear improvements as well compared to their prior games. There is higher visual fidelity than those games, more detailed textures, better lighting and shadows. There's also a new animation system, and from the few bits of gameplay we saw, it all does look better than what we got in the base versions of Skyrim and Fallout 4. Of course, you would hope so because it's been over 10 years and 7 years respectively. Some of the specific improvements that were noted by the Digital Foundry video, for the exterior spaces, they noted that the game has long distance shadow rendering, as well as valley fog and atmospheric rendering, all looks really good. Also, terrain rendering has minimal pop-in. This is pretty cool. Things like rocks and debris and grass are all visible from quite far distances. Again, another huge improvement over their prior single-player games. The interior spaces, which I thought especially looked good, they have much better shadows than what is seen in the exterior spots. They're also more sharp and defined, a huge leap in fidelity. The weapon detail looks really good. I agree with that as well. And the animations are improved over prior Bethesda games. Speaking of which, facial animations are greatly improved, and there were some good-looking effects in spots of it. And even with all of that good stuff in mind, I'm recalling that initial reveal trailer for Starfield, the one that was said to be alpha in-game footage, and like, I don't know about you, but this looks a heck of a lot better than what we saw in the actual gameplay. The visual quality seems much higher here. Now, there is a distinction to be made between in-engine footage and gameplay footage, to be sure, but putting some of this teaser footage side by side with the gameplay footage, they look like they could be from different games. At this point, though, I suppose we are no stranger to announcement trailers and teaser trailers overselling a game's visuals. I just thought that was noteworthy. Moving on, though, from the visuals and performance, I want to briefly touch on gameplay. I haven't played the game, obviously, but one common point of criticism that I agree with just from the trailer is that the gunplay looked rather lacking. We can only tell so much from a trailer, but it definitely doesn't appear to be satisfying. One quote that I saw that I think nailed the sentiment was that it doesn't look like there's a player engaging with an enemy that is reacting to being hit. It more looks like we're shooting at a moving health bar and just trying to drain it to zero, and then an animation happens when that character falls over. And I feel like that's spot on. The visuals, the animations, and the sound effects that were on display in the brief combat sections they showcased did not seem even remotely satisfying. And this is just like another one of those things, just like the visuals and performance, that I feel we're adding to the list of, oh gosh, you guys, well, you know, Bethesda, they don't do this part well. They never have, so stop complaining about it. The graphics have always been subpar. Performance has always been bad. Gameplay has never been their strong suit. It's the other stuff that they're great at. And as funny as it sounds when you string those bits together, I also agree what I have loved about Bethesda games in the past never boiled down to just the visuals, just the performance, or just the gameplay. Those things have always been passable in service of the overall Bethesda RPG experience. But I suppose what I hoped for and what I am so disappointed by is that we haven't moved past any of this. I feel like we should start expecting more and hoping at least for improvement. I'm hoping for improvement. That's mostly what this video is. The complaining is hoping and wishing that they could move past any of this, that they could have modern day looking visuals, have good performance, and have modern day and satisfying gameplay. Even though they've done leaps over their prior single player games from 10 and 7 years ago, they still feel several years behind what the current threshold is. And maybe that's just a consequence of certainly the engine that they're working with, but then also how long these games take them to make. That is almost certainly the answer, but nevertheless, I wish we didn't have to concede to the fact that they're always several steps behind in those elements. And I wish that you know what I mean? That is the ultimate wish. The next section is like a minor gripe. I want to just touch on the setting. I feel like a lot of what they showed in the trailer doesn't really build excitement. Like a lot of the shots of these planetscapes are simply empty, as they would be, right? Like, for example, if you take a look at this screenshot, this is one of the images that gets used a lot in articles discussing this game. And they're trying to sell a concept here, right? They're trying to say, just like back in the Skyrim days, wow, look, you see that mountain off in the distance? You can go there. But when I look at this, that pitch doesn't instill the same level as excitement in Skyrim or Fallout. Why is that? Well, look at it. there's nothing. Like, there's nothing to entice exploration. It's all just craggy hills. There is no point of interest in the distance grabbing your attention. Whereas in Skyrim, every direction you looked, there would be something drawing you and pulling you towards it. Some old ruins, a town or a city, a castle, a statue, something. But this is just like craggy hills. That's it. And I'm not criticizing the entire game based off of one screenshot. This is, again, one of those consequences of them deciding to go with the scale. They've said it themselves. There are going to be planets that are just ice planets and there's not much on it. Obviously, the hope is they're going to have just as much, if not probably more, of the handcrafted experience. You know, there will be installations that go deep underground or wide sprawling cities, ruins, and all sorts of this different stuff. I'm just, I suppose, surprised that so much of the trailer that they showed off was just like boring looking planets. But I realize that is supposed to be in addition to all of the handcrafted stuff. So I just feel like they could have sold it a little bit better. Sold the mystery of 1,000 planets, of not just being boring flat terrain with not a lot to see, but the mystery of all those different locales. And they did, to their credit, they did do some of that in the parts that I think look great, in all of those cool looking points of interest, the stuff that looks like deep mining facilities and large sprawling installments and enemy bases and stuff. And that's the stuff I'm excited for. Yeah, I'm just surprised they focused on why even have any shots of the boring parts of the planets, but that is a minor gripe. There are a couple of other things that people have raised concerns by. These are smaller to me, but stuff like it appears you can't manually land or take off from planets. It's just an animation that runs for both. Choose a spot to go, the spaceship lands itself, and then when you take off into space, it takes off itself. It also is uncertain, but I do believe atmospheric flight is not going to be in the game based on everything they've talked about and showed. This is a raging debate apparently on the forums and Reddit when I was looking though, but I don't believe, I'd be surprised if atmospheric flight was in. And I also don't particularly care. I guess if anything, it's if there is no atmospheric flight and we're talking like not in space but above the surface of the planet, this idea of wanting to stay on a planet but not walk around the whole thing, do they have an answer for that? Or am I like taking off into orbit and then re-clicking on the planet and going back in and then taking off and going back in? Is that what's going to be happening to people wanting to explore planets? Those are questions we just don't know the answers to. The final major concern and point of criticism just has to do with Bethesda themselves. While I do think fondly of them as a game developer, a lot of that is in the past. Sometimes I feel like I have to remind myself that it's been a solid 7 years, of this. Since Fallout 4 launched in 2015, Bethesda game releases go as follows. In 2016, there was the Skyrim Special Edition, the third version of the game following the 2011 release and 2013's Legendary Edition. In 2017, we got Skyrim VR, the fourth version of the game. In 2017, we also got Fallout 4 VR, the second version of that game. Then in 2018, there was the live service, bug-laden, microtransaction-packed Fallout 76. In 2020, Elder Scrolls phone game that as heavy-handedly monetized as you imagine. And then in 2021, we had the Skyrim Anniversary Edition, the fifth version of that game. To put all of this simply, the direction Bethesda has gone in over these past 7 years doesn't instill a ton of confidence between them constantly retreading old ground and the addition of all of these microtransaction heavy games. And I know the industry isn't the same today as it was in 2011 when Skyrim released, or even in 2015 for Fallout 4, but I do think it's fair to say, phone games and multiplayer live service games all full of microtransactions, that is not what made us fall in love with Bethesda titles in the past. Even that one with horse armor wasn't as bad as any of this stuff. And all of this has me concerned what exactly they have in mind for Starfield's monetization. Obviously, I don't expect it'll be as bad as 76 or Blades, but I would also be surprised if this was just a base box price. I am thinking there's a very decent chance that Starfield at the very least has cosmetics for sale if they don't dip further into the microtransaction pool. As of now, I couldn't find any confirmation for or against this. It is a wait and see. Yeah, I'm not expecting Starfield to just be $60 and that's the end of the monetization. I do think they're going to start to push harder in other directions. So to wrap all of this up, I do want to say, I realize some of this might come off as a bit nitpicky, but I promise you, I am not just reaching for stuff to be bothered by. It's more that I just wish things were getting better. My biggest point of disappointment is that their visuals are fairly bland, but my biggest points of concern are absolutely the game's performance. Like, we need this. We need games. We should expect games to run well. We really should. And I'm also concerned about what they have planned for monetization. That said, there is a lot to be excited for, and there is a lot I'm looking forward to. And at the end of the day, I hope their vision comes together. You know, the game was delayed, and ideally they used the time to improve performance, to polish up the visuals and the animations, and to maybe decide to just sell the game for $60. Now, as of now, we still don't have a firm release date for Starfield. It is slated for sometime in the first half of 2023. But regardless of the actual date, the hope is that they can address some of these problems, some of these concerns we have, and just make this as good a game as it can be. And Bethesda, I would like you to push the bar rather than being below the bar with a lot of those elements. There's a lot that are great about your games, really, and I hope you can kind of rekindle some of that magic that you used to do in the past. That's gonna do it for today, guys. Thank you so much as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.